The boy was 12 years old when he first saw the piano. He didn't come from a family with money. He didn't come from a neighborhood where kids took music lessons or went to summer camps. He came from the kind of place where people worked hard just to survive, where dreams were something you saw on television, not something you actually lived. His mother raised him alone. She worked at a factory during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. Sometimes he wouldn't see her for days, except for the few minutes in the morning, when she rushed out the door. She always kissed him on the forehead before leaving, always told him to be good, always looked tired in a way that made his chest hurt. They lived in a small apartment on the east side of the city. 2 tiny rooms with cracked walls and windows that let in the cold during winter. The heater barely worked. The faucet dripped all night, but it was home. It was theirs. The boy was a quiet kid. Not shy exactly, just quiet. He didn't talk much at school. He sat in the back of every class and kept his head down. He wasn't popular. He wasn't unpopular either. He was just there, like a shadow that moved through the hallways without making a sound. He didn't have hobbies. He didn't play sports. After school, he would come home, do his homework, heat up whatever food his mother had left for him, and sit by the window watching the street below. That was his life. Simple, predictable, empty in a way he couldn't explain. But one day, something happened that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon in early November. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds. The boy was walking home from school, taking his usual route through the back alley behind the community center. He liked that route because it was quiet. No other kids, no noise, just him and his thoughts. That day, he noticed something different. There was a crowd gathered near the old storage shed at the back of the community center. About 6 or 7 people, mostly teenagers, standing around and laughing. The boy slowed down. He wasn't the type to get involved in anything, but curiosity got the better of him. He walked closer and saw what they were looking at. It was a piano. An old upright piano, sitting on the concrete like it had been dropped there and forgotten. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the keys were yellow with age. One of the legs looked like it might snap at any moment. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The teenagers were making fun of it. One of them banged on the keys randomly, creating a mess of ugly sounds. Another one pretended to play like a concert pianist, moving his hands dramatically while the others laughed. Someone said they should push it down the hill and watch it crash. Someone else said they should set it on fire. The boy stood frozen. Something inside him felt sick. He didn't understand why. But watching them treat that piano like garbage made his stomach turn. He found out later what had happened. The community center was getting rid of old equipment. The piano had been sitting in their basement for over 20 years. Nobody used it anymore. Nobody wanted it. So they put it outside for the trash collectors to take away. That night, the boy couldn't stop thinking about it. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and all he could see was that piano. Those black and white keys. The way the wood had aged like an old photograph. He had never touched a piano before. He had never even been close to one. But something about it called to him, like a voice only he could hear. The next morning, he woke up early, earlier than usual. He got dressed quickly and ran out of the apartment before his mother was awake. He ran all the way to the community center, his breath coming out in white puffs in the cold air. The piano was still there. He walked up to it slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then, he reached out and touched one of the keys. The sound that came out was soft and warm, a single note hanging in the cold morning air. He pressed another key, then another. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know anything about music, but something inside him clicked. Something woke up. He sat there for almost an hour, just pressing keys and listening. When he finally went to school, He was late for the first time in his life. He didn't care. For the next 3 days, he visited that piano every morning and every afternoon. He kept expecting it to be gone, kept expecting the trash collectors to take it away, but it stayed there, like it was waiting for him. On the 4th day, he made a decision. When his mother came home that night, he was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for her. She looked exhausted. Like always. Her feet were swollen. Her eyes were red. But when she saw him sitting there, she knew something was different. He told her about the piano. He told her how he found it. He told her how he had been visiting it every day. He told her that he wanted to bring it home. He wanted to learn how to play. His mother sat down across from him. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just looked at him with those tired, gentle eyes. Finally, she spoke. "We don't have room for a piano," she said. "We don't have money for lessons. We don't have anything." The boy nodded. He knew all of that. "I'll teach myself," he said. "I'll figure it out. I just need the piano. Please." His mother rubbed her face with both hands. She let out a long breath. Then she looked at him again. "You really want this?" she asked. "More than anything," he said. Something shifted in her expression. Maybe she saw the desperation in his eyes. Maybe she remembered what it felt like to want something so badly it hurt. Maybe she was just too tired to argue. "Okay," she said. "Let's go get it." They borrowed a cart from the building supervisor. They walked to the community center together in the dark. The piano was still there, covered now with a thin layer of frost. It took them almost 2 hours to load it onto the cart and push it back home. The wheels squeaked the whole way. The cart nearly tipped over twice. By the time they got it up the stairs and into their apartment, both of them were drenched in sweat despite the cold. The piano barely fit. They had to push the couch against the wall and move the kitchen table into the corner. The apartment felt even smaller now, but when the boy sat down on the little wooden bench and placed his hands on the keys, none of that mattered. He pressed a single key. The note rang out in their tiny home. His mother stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You better make this worth it," she said softly. He looked up at her and nodded. "I will," he said. "I promise." That night, after his mother went to sleep, he stayed up for hours. Just sitting there, pressing keys, listening, learning. He had no teacher. He had no books. He had no idea what he was doing. But he had something else. Something that couldn't be taught. He had hunger. He had fire. He had a feeling deep in his bones that this broken piano was going to change his life. He just didn't know yet how much pain would come before that happened. The first few weeks were brutal. The boy had no idea what he was doing. He would sit at that old piano for hours, pressing keys randomly, trying to make something that sounded like music. Most of the time, it just sounded like noise. Ugly, messy noise that made his ears hurt. He didn't have money for lessons. He didn't have books or guides. All he had was a library card and a dream that felt more impossible with each passing day. Every afternoon after school, he walked to the public library on 5th Street. It was about 20 minutes from his apartment. But he didn't mind the walk. The library had computers, and the computers had internet. That was his classroom. That was where he learned everything. He would sit in the back corner, headphones plugged in, watching video after video of people playing piano. He watched tutorials for beginners. He watched performances by famous pianists. He watched everything he could find. Then he would go home and try to copy what he saw. It was frustrating. His fingers wouldn't move the way he wanted them to. His hands were clumsy and slow. The sounds he made were nothing like the sounds in the videos. Some nights, he wanted to quit. Some nights he sat at that piano and felt tears burning in his eyes because nothing was working. But he didn't stop. Every single day, no matter how tired or frustrated he was, he practiced. 1 hour became 2. 2 became 3. 3 became 4. His mother would come home late at night and find him still sitting at that piano, his eyes heavy with sleep but his fingers still moving. She never told him to stop. She never complained about the noise. Even when she had worked a double shift and could barely stand, she would just smile at him softly and go to bed. She believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. Slowly, very slowly, things started to change. After about 2 months, he could play simple melodies. Nothing fancy, just basic songs that beginners learned. But to him, it felt like magic. The first time he played a complete song from start to finish without making a mistake, he just sat there staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. He started practicing at school too. There was an old piano in the music room that nobody ever used. During lunch breaks, while other kids were eating and talking and laughing, he would sneak into that room and practice. He thought no one noticed. He thought he was invisible, just like always. He was wrong. It started with whispers. Kids, walking past the music room, hearing the sounds coming from inside. At first, they were just curious. Then, they started talking. The quiet kid from the back of the class was playing piano. The poor kid with the worn-out shoes and the second-hand clothes. The kid who never spoke to anyone. Some people thought it was cool. Most people thought it was weird. And a few people thought it was hilarious. One day during lunch, 3 boys from his grade walked into the music room while he was practicing. He didn't notice them at first. He was too focused on the keys, too lost in the music. When he finally looked up, they were standing right behind him, with smirks on their faces. "What are you doing?" they asked. "You think you're some kind of musician now?" The boy didn't say anything. He just stared at them, his heart pounding in his chest. One of them laughed, pushed him lightly on the shoulder. "Come on, play something for us. Show us what you got." The boy shook his head. He tried to get up and leave, but they blocked his way. "No, seriously," one of them said. "We want to hear you play, unless you're scared." He wasn't scared. But he knew what they wanted. They wanted to make fun of him. They wanted something to laugh about. He could see it in their eyes, but something inside him refused to back down. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was that fire his mother always said she saw in him. He turned back to the piano. He placed his hands on the keys, and he started to play. It wasn't perfect. His fingers stumbled a few times. He hit a wrong note near the middle, but he made it through the whole piece. When he finished, he turned around to face them. They were laughing. Not impressed laughing. Not surprised laughing. Mocking. Cruel laughing. One of them clapped slowly, with a fake smile on his face. "Wow," he said. "That was terrible. You actually think you're good at this?" The boy felt his face burn with shame. He grabbed his bag and pushed past them, walking out of the music room as fast as he could. Behind him, he could hear them still laughing. Still mocking. That should have been the end of it. A small embarrassment, quickly forgotten. But it wasn't. One of those boys had recorded him on his phone. The whole thing. The stumbling fingers. The wrong notes. The awkward silence at the end. That night, he posted it online with a caption that said something like, "This kid actually thinks he can play piano." By the next morning, everyone at school had seen it. The boy walked into class and felt every eye on him. People were whispering. Some were laughing. A girl in the front row looked at him with pity, which somehow felt even worse. He sat down at his desk in the back and stared at the floor, wishing he could disappear. The video spread beyond just his school. Friends shared it with friends. Strangers shared it with strangers. Within a week, thousands of people had seen it. And the comments were brutal. He should just give up. Some people weren't meant to make music. Stick to something you're actually good at. The boy read every single comment. He couldn't help himself. Each one felt like a knife in his chest. He had never felt so humiliated in his life. So small, so worthless. That night, he came home and sat at the piano. But he didn't play. He just sat there, staring at the keys, feeling empty inside. What was the point? Everyone was laughing at him. Everyone thought he was a joke. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was fooling himself. Maybe some dreams were just too big for people like him. His mother came home around midnight. She found him still sitting at the piano, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. She didn't ask what happened. She had already heard from a neighbor whose kid went to the same school. She sat down next to him on the small bench. For a long time, neither of them said anything. They just sat there together in the quiet darkness. Finally, she spoke. "You know what I see when I look at you?" she asked. He shook his head. "I see a boy who dragged a broken piano up 3 flights of stairs because he believed in something. I see a boy who taught himself to play without any help from anyone. I see a boy who has more courage than all those kids laughing at him combined." She put her hand on his. "They don't get to decide who you are," she said. "Only you get to decide that. So the question is, are you going to let them win? Or are you going to show them what you're made of?" The boy looked at his mother. Her eyes were tired but fierce, full of love. He took a deep breath. Then he turned back to the piano, and he started to play. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't anywhere close to perfect. But it was something. It was a promise to himself that he wasn't done yet. The world had laughed at him. The world had told him to quit. But the boy had decided something important that night. He wasn't going to quit. He was going to get better. And one day, he was going to make all of them see what they had missed. One day, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. A year passed. 12 long months of early mornings and late nights. 12 months of sore fingers and aching wrists. 12 months of practicing the same pieces over and over until they lived inside his bones. The boy was 13 now. He had grown a little taller, a little thinner. But the biggest change wasn't something you could see on the outside. It was something that lived inside him. A quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. A sense of purpose that guided everything he did. He still went to the library every day after school. But now he wasn't just watching beginner tutorials. He was studying the masters. He watched old recordings of classical pianists from decades ago. He studied their hand movements, their posture, the way they breathed between notes. He learned about music theory from free online courses. He read articles about composition and technique. He absorbed everything like a sponge. At home, the old piano had become part of his body. He knew every key, every sound, every imperfection. He knew which keys stuck and how to work around them. He knew which notes rang a little flat and how to adjust his playing to compensate. That broken piano was his teacher, his friend, his whole world. The kids at school had mostly forgotten about the video. There was always new drama, new gossip, new things to talk about. The boy was invisible again, which suited him fine. He didn't need their attention anymore. He didn't need their approval. All he needed was the music. But something else was happening too. Something that surprised even him. He had started writing his own music. It began by accident. One night, he was sitting at the piano, tired from homework and not really thinking about anything. His fingers started moving on their own, pressing keys in a pattern he had never played before. It wasn't a song he had learned. It wasn't something he had heard somewhere. It was something new, something that came from inside him. He stopped and stared at his hands. Then he tried to play it again. The same melody, the same feeling. It was rough and unfinished, but it was his, completely his. Over the next few months, he kept working on it, adding notes here, changing rhythms there, building it piece by piece like a house made of sound. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing, not even his mother. It felt too personal, too fragile, like if he talked about it, it might break apart and disappear. The composition was about his life, about growing up without a father, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion every single day, about feeling invisible and alone, about finding that broken piano and finally having something that made him feel alive. Every note carried a piece of his story. Every chord held an emotion he couldn't put into words. When he finally finished it, he didn't know what to do. He just played it over and over in the empty apartment, tears sometimes rolling down his cheeks without him even noticing. It was the most honest thing he had ever created, the most beautiful thing he had ever done. One evening in late spring, something unexpected happened. His mother came home early. This almost never happened. In the 5 years they had lived in that apartment, he could count on one hand the number of times she had come home before midnight. But that evening, she walked through the door at 7 o'clock. She had gotten a raise at work, she explained. Not a big one, but enough to cut back her hours a little. She didn't have to work the night shift anymore. At least not every night. The boy felt something warm spread through his chest. He hugged her tight, and she laughed, surprised by the sudden affection. They made dinner together for the first time in months. Simple food. Rice and beans and vegetables from the corner store. But it felt like a feast. They sat at the small table pushed against the wall and talked about everything. School, work, the leaky faucet that still hadn't been fixed, the neighbor's dog that barked every morning at 6. After they finished eating, his mother looked at the piano in the corner of the room. She tilted her head, a small smile on her face. "You know," she said, "I hear you playing every night when I come home, but I'm always too tired to really listen. Tonight I'm not tired. Will you play something for me?" The boy felt his heart skip. He had never performed for anyone before. Not really. Not something that mattered. The incident at school didn't count. That was an ambush, a trap. This was different. This was his mother asking to hear him play. He nodded slowly and walked over to the piano. He sat down on the bench, his hands trembling slightly. He thought about playing one of the classical pieces he had learned. Something safe, something impressive. But then he changed his mind. He was going to play his composition. The one he had never shared with anyone. The one that held his whole heart inside it. He took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the keys, and began to play. The music filled the small apartment like water filling a glass. Soft at first, gentle and searching, then building, growing, becoming something bigger. The melody moved through sadness and loneliness, through struggle and pain. Then it shifted. Hope crept in. Strength, determination. The notes climbed higher, reaching for something just out of grasp. And then the ending. Quiet again. Peaceful. A single note, hanging in the air, like a promise. When he finished, the silence was heavy. He was afraid to turn around, afraid of what he might see on his mother's face. Finally, he looked. She was crying. Not sad crying. Something else. Something deeper. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Her hands were pressed against her chest, like she was trying to hold her heart inside her body. She stood up and walked over to him. She didn't say anything at first. She just wrapped her arms around him and held him tight. He could feel her shoulders shaking. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard," she whispered. "In my whole life. That was the most beautiful thing." The boy felt tears in his own eyes now. He buried his face in her shoulder and let them fall. They stayed like that for a long time. Mother and son, holding each other in that tiny apartment, with the cracked walls and the broken piano. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the bills, not the exhaustion, not the years of struggle. Just this, just love. Later that night, after the boy had gone to bed, his mother stayed up. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that slowly went cold. She was thinking hard about something. The next morning, she woke him up early. There was a strange look in her eyes. Nervous, but excited. "I need to tell you something," she said. She sat down on the edge of his bed and took his hand. "I've been saving money," she said. "For emergencies. It's not much. Just a little bit every month for the past few years. I was keeping it in case something bad happened. In case we needed it to survive." The boy nodded, confused about where this was going. His mother squeezed his hand. "There's a music competition next month," she said. "At the concert hall downtown. For young musicians. I looked it up last night after you went to sleep. The entry fee is expensive. Really expensive." She paused, took a breath. "I'm going to use the emergency money to enter you in that competition," she said. The boy's eyes went wide. He started to protest. That money was important. What if something went wrong? What if they needed it? His mother held up her hand to stop him. "Listen to me," she said. "What I heard last night was not just good. It was special. You have a gift. A real gift. And I am not going to let money be the reason the world never gets to hear it." She looked him straight in the eyes. "This is the emergency," she said. "This is what that money was for. I just didn't know it until now." The boy didn't know what to say. He felt overwhelmed, scared, grateful. 1,000 emotions all tangled up together. His mother smiled at him. "So," she said, "are you ready to show the world what you can do?" The boy thought about the long year behind him. The pain, the practice, the tears, the nights when he wanted to give up, and the mornings when he forced himself to keep going. He thought about the kids who had laughed at him, the video that had humiliated him, the comments that had cut him like knives, and then he thought about his music, his composition, the piece of his soul that he had poured into those keys. He looked at his mother and nodded. "I'm ready," he said. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He had no idea how hard the next few weeks would be, but for the first time in his life, he believed that maybe, just maybe, his dream was possible. The day of the competition arrived faster than he expected. One moment he was practicing in his tiny apartment, and the next moment, he was standing outside the biggest building he had ever seen. The concert hall was downtown, in a part of the city he had never been to before. Tall glass windows, white marble columns. An entrance so grand, it looked like something from a movie. People in expensive clothes walked up the steps like they belonged there. Like this was just another Saturday for them. The boy stood at the bottom of those steps, frozen. He was wearing the nicest clothes he owned. A button-up shirt his mother had ironed 3 times that morning. Black pants that were slightly too short because he had grown since she bought them last year. Shoes that were clean but visibly worn. He looked at the other people walking inside. Kids his age in tailored suits. Girls in elegant dresses. Parents carrying instrument cases that probably cost more than his mother made in a month. Everyone looked polished. Everyone looked prepared. Everyone looked like they belonged. He didn't belong here. He knew it. Everyone who looked at him knew it too. His mother squeezed his hand. She was wearing her best dress, the one she only wore to church on holidays. She looked nervous, but proud. "Come on," she said. "Let's go inside." The lobby was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The floor was so shiny he could see his reflection in it. There were signs pointing to different rooms. Registration. Warm-up areas. The main auditorium. Everything was organized and professional, and completely terrifying. They found the registration desk and signed in. A woman in a black blazer looked at him over her glasses, then at his mother, then back at him. She handed him a number without saying a word. 17. He was contestant number 17. There were 24 contestants total. The boy looked around at the others, waiting in the hallway. Some were stretching their fingers. Some were listening to music through expensive headphones. Some were talking quietly with their coaches. Yes, coaches. Most of these kids had professional coaches standing right beside them, giving last-minute advice. The boy had no coach. He had his mother. And that was enough. They found a quiet corner to sit and wait. The competition wouldn't start for another hour. Contestants would perform one by one in the main auditorium. A panel of 5 judges would score each performance. At the end of the day, they would announce the winners. First place received a full scholarship to a prestigious music academy. Second and third place received smaller prizes. Everyone else received nothing but the experience. The boy wasn't thinking about winning. He was just trying not to throw up. As they waited, something caught his eye. A group of teenagers walked past, laughing and talking loudly. One of them looked familiar. Too familiar. His stomach dropped. It was one of the boys from school. The one who had recorded that video a year ago. The one who had posted it online and made him a joke. He was here, at the competition, wearing a contestant number on his chest. The boy felt the blood drain from his face. He looked down at the floor, hoping he hadn't been seen, but it was too late. "Hey," a voice called out. "No way. Is that who I think it is?" Footsteps approached. The boy forced himself to look up. The kid from school was standing there with a smirk on his face. 2 friends stood behind him, grinning. "I can't believe you actually showed up here," the kid said. "What? You think because you practiced in your little apartment for a year, you can compete with us? I've been taking lessons since I was 5. My teacher is one of the best in the state." The boy didn't say anything. He just sat there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His mother started to stand up, her eyes flashing with anger. But the boy touched her arm gently, stopping her. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let it go." The kid laughed. "Yeah. Listen to your mommy," he said. "Good luck out there. You're going to need it." They walked away, still laughing. The boy sat in silence. His heart was pounding. All the old feelings came rushing back. The shame, the embarrassment, the voice in his head telling him he wasn't good enough, would never be good enough. His mother took his hand again. "Don't listen to them," she said. "You know what you can do. I know what you can do. That's all that matters." He nodded, but inside he felt shaky, small. Like he was 12 years old again. Running out of that music room, with laughter chasing him down the hallway. The competition started. One by one, contestants were called to the stage. The boy sat in the audience with his mother, watching each performance. They were good. Really good. Fingers flying across keys with perfect precision. Complex pieces performed without a single mistake. Polished, practiced, professional. The kid from school performed too. Number 12. He played a classical piece with technical perfection. When he finished, the audience clapped politely. He walked off stage with a confident smile, glancing toward where the boy was sitting. Contestant number 17, a voice announced over the speakers. This was it. The boy stood up. His legs felt like they were made of water. His mother grabbed his hand one more time. "Play for me," she whispered. "Just like you did at home. Forget everyone else. Just play for me." He nodded. Then he walked toward the stage. The auditorium was massive. Hundreds of red velvet seats stretching back into shadows. Bright lights shining down on the stage. And in the center, a grand piano. Black and gleaming and beautiful. It was nothing like his old broken piano at home. It was perfect. He walked across the stage, his worn shoes silent on the polished wood. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, judging him, doubting him. He sat down at the bench, adjusted his position, placed his hands on the keys. For a moment, everything was silent. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then, he began to play. He played his composition. The one he had written in his tiny apartment. The one that held his whole life inside it. The one he had played for his mother that night, when everything changed. The first notes were soft, gentle. like a question being asked in the darkness. Then, the melody began to build, layer upon layer of emotion, sadness and struggle, loneliness and longing, the sound of sirens outside a window, the feeling of being invisible, the weight of watching your mother work herself to exhaustion, and then the shift, hope breaking through like sunlight, strength rising from somewhere deep inside. The moment he touched that abandoned piano for the first time, the nights of practice, the refusal to quit, the fire that burned no matter how many people tried to put it out. The music swelled and soared. His fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own. He wasn't thinking anymore. He wasn't worrying. He was just feeling, just letting the music pour out of him like a river breaking through a dam. And then the ending. Soft again. Peaceful. A single note hanging in the air, then silence. He sat there, breathing hard, his hands still resting on the keys. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched on, and he felt his heart start to sink. Maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe he had made a mistake. Maybe everyone was just sitting there, embarrassed for him. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was applauding. Not polite applause like the other contestants had received. This was something else. This was thunder. This was a wave crashing against the shore. People were standing up. One by one, then all at once. A standing ovation. The boy looked out at the crowd, his eyes blurred with tears. He couldn't believe what was happening. This didn't feel real. He found his mother in the audience. She was on her feet like everyone else, tears streaming down her face, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. She mouthed 2 words at him. "That's my son." And in that moment, all the pain was worth it. All the struggle, all the tears, all the nights when he wanted to give up. He had done it. He had shown them who he really was. The boy who came from nothing. The boy who taught himself on a broken piano. The boy they had laughed at. He wasn't a joke anymore. He was a musician. The applause lasted for what felt like forever. The boy walked off the stage in a daze, his legs shaking, his mind spinning. He didn't know what had just happened. He didn't know if it was real. His mother was waiting for him backstage. She pulled him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. She was still crying. So was he. They stood there holding each other while the competition continued, neither of them saying a word. The remaining contestants performed after him. Some were technically perfect. Some made small mistakes. The boy didn't really pay attention. He was too overwhelmed, too exhausted. All he could do was sit in a chair backstage and wait. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last contestant finished. The judges disappeared into a private room to make their decisions. The audience waited. The contestants waited. Everyone held their breath. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. Then an hour. The boy's mother held his hand the entire time. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Finally, a woman in a black dress walked onto the stage with an envelope in her hand. The auditorium fell silent. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about the importance of music education. She praised all the contestants for their hard work and dedication. The boy barely heard any of it. His heart was beating so loud he was sure everyone around him could hear it. Then she opened the envelope. 3rd place went to a girl who had played a complicated classical piece. She walked onto the stage, accepted her trophy, and smiled for the cameras. Polite applause filled the room. 2nd place went to another boy, someone from a fancy music school on the north side of the city. He looked disappointed, but forced a smile as he accepted his award. The woman paused. She looked out at the audience with a small smile. "And now," she said, "1st place." The boy closed his eyes. He couldn't look. He couldn't breathe. "This year's 1st place winner," she continued, "delivered a performance that moved every single person in this room. A completely original composition, performed with a level of emotion and authenticity that is rare at any age. The judges were unanimous in their decision. She read out his name. For a moment, he didn't move. He thought he had heard wrong. He thought maybe there was another contestant with the same name. It couldn't be him. It couldn't possibly be him. His mother shook his arm. "Go," she whispered. "Go up there." He stood up slowly. His legs felt numb. The walk to the stage seemed to take forever. Every step felt like moving through water. When he reached the stage, the woman handed him a large trophy. Gold and shining and heavier than he expected. She also handed him an envelope. 2. Inside was a letter confirming his full scholarship to one of the most prestigious music academies in the country. Full tuition, free room and board, world-class teachers, everything paid for. Everything. The boy stood there holding the trophy and the envelope, staring out at the crowd. The lights were blinding. The applause was deafening. But he wasn't looking at the lights or listening to the applause. He was looking at his mother. She was on her feet again, clapping and crying and smiling all at once. The proudest look he had ever seen on anyone's face. He lifted the trophy in the air, and the crowd roared even louder. Later, after the ceremony ended, people swarmed around him. Strangers shaking his hand, reporters asking for interviews, parents of other contestants congratulating him. It was overwhelming and surreal. At one point, he noticed the kid from his school standing off to the side. The one who had recorded him. The one who had laughed at him just hours ago. He wasn't laughing now. He was standing alone, watching, his face blank. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The boy didn't feel angry. He didn't feel smug or satisfied. He just felt tired, and maybe a little sad. He nodded at the kid. Just a small nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like it. An acknowledgement. A closing of a chapter. Then he turned away and walked back to his mother. The weeks that followed changed everything. The video of his performance went viral. But this time the comments were different. People called him inspiring. People called him a genius. News stations wanted to interview him. Music magazines wanted to write about him. Everyone wanted to know his story. He told it honestly. He talked about growing up poor, about the broken piano by the dumpster, about teaching himself through library videos, about the bullying and the humiliation, about his mother working 2 jobs just to keep them alive, about the night she used her emergency savings to give him a chance. His story spread across the country, then across the world. People who had never heard of him before were sharing his video, writing messages of support, crying over his journey. But the boy didn't let it go to his head. He stayed humble, stayed focused. When fall came, he packed his few belongings and moved into the music academy. His mother cried the day he left. So did he. But they both knew this was what they had worked for. This was the dream. The academy was hard. Harder than anything he had ever done. The other students had years of professional training. They could sight-read music he had never seen before. They knew theory and history and techniques he was just beginning to understand. But he didn't give up. He never gave up. He practiced longer than anyone else, studied harder than anyone else. Slowly, step by step, he caught up. Then he passed them. By the time he graduated 4 years later, he was the top student in his class. The years after that moved fast. His first professional performance, his first album, his first tour, awards and recognition and sold-out concert halls. He played on stages around the world. He met presidents and celebrities and millions of fans who knew his name. But through all of it, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the cracked walls and the cold winters and the sound of his mother's tired footsteps on the stairs. And he never forgot that broken piano. Years later, when he was famous and successful and could afford anything he wanted, he did something unexpected. He bought a house for his mother. A real house with a garden and a big kitchen and windows that didn't let in the cold. He filled it with everything she had ever wanted, but never allowed herself to dream of. And in the living room, in the place of honor, he put the old piano. The same broken piano. They had dragged up 3 flights of stairs when he was 12 years old. He had it restored by the best craftsman in the world. Every scratch fixed. Every key repaired. But he kept a small chip on the corner, right where it had always been. A reminder of where it all started. The night he gave his mother the keys to the house, they sat together at that piano one last time. She was older now. Her hair had gone gray. Her hands were weathered from years of hard work, but her eyes still sparkled the same way they did when she watched him play for the first time. "Play something for me," she said. Just like the old days. He smiled, placed his fingers on the keys, and he played the composition he had written all those years ago. The one about his life. The one about her. When he finished, she was crying again. But this time, they were tears of pure joy. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "No," he said. "We did it." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Inside, mother and son sat together at the piano that had changed everything. A broken piano that nobody wanted, a boy that nobody believed in, and a dream that refused to die. Sometimes the world laughs at you. Sometimes the world tells you to quit. Sometimes the world tries to convince you that you're not good enough. But if you have the courage to keep going, if you have someone who believes in you, if you have a fire inside that nothing can put out, then anything is possible. The boy at the piano proved that, and now, his music lives forever.